Welcome to Deciphering Growth, the show that explores mental health from every angle. We bring you conversations with personal opinions, stories, and practical tips. We aim to break down the stigma and help you live your best life. So please sit back and let's dive in. Before we begin, we want to remind our listeners that this podcast represents the opinions of Tiffany Graves, Eric Stone, and the show's guests. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Please consult a healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed are our own and do not represent those of our workplaces. Listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content does not establish a doctor-patient relationship.
All right, we
Good
are
morning.
back today. I'm sorry I cut you off already.
Nope. I just was trying. It's usually you, Tiffany, and I was like, I'm gonna not make her do it, but it honestly only messed it up.
No worries. It's nice to start off with a little lighter tone since today's topic is probably going to be, I say probably, but it is going to be very controversial probably to some people. Um, Definitely want to make sure we lay on thick the warnings and disclaimers and whatnot.
Yeah, we will be talking about hate groups. Um, and I think it's gonna just be heavy for anyone. So I do just want to put out like the most informed trigger warning we've ever done. Like we will be talking like pretty much exclusively about hate the entire episode and characteristics of it, how it can happen. So all this to say, if you're not in a mental headspace to hear about hate groups today, or maybe you're just in a place where you're like, you know what, I don't really care like what the psyche is. I don't care about the reasons. Like, we really just want to respect your voice. And so like that is genuinely what 95% of this discussion is going to be about. So maybe we'll catch you in a different episode if that is not the psyche or headspace you're in. I know Tiff and I have talked about this. We have to feel like we're in a certain headspace to do some of these conversations. So please take your leave and go with peace. There's no issue if this is not the conversation, but we feel very convicted about having an episode about this, just with what has been happening where we live locally, and also just what is going on in the world. So I don't want to steal all your thunder, Tiffany, but that's probably my trigger warning.
No, I think that's a great trigger warning. Feel free to steal the thunder because this is going to be a very sensitive episode for sure. Do you want to start us off, or do you want me to start us off with recent hate, or?
I think if you start us off, yeah, probably a good base to start from.
Okay. So I think it was about 3 weeks ago. If timing is off, feel free to correct me. That a group of about a dozenish individuals displayed swastika flags and banners with white supremacist messages on Interstate 75 overpass near Evendale and Lincoln Heights neighborhood. Some of the demonstrators were masked. They were confronted by local residents, which led to a pretty tense standoff. The group dispersed shortly after community members were challenging their presence. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe police was helpful in disbanding that group at all.
They did not. They did not. They did not disband. They actually helped them leave under their protection.
Yeah. So I remember there being a discussion about the lack of arrests or citations for masked and armed protesters. Um, yeah. I know like there were some people challenging like we have to balance constitutional rights. And I was like, maybe if it's a peaceful protest, but this didn't seem very peaceful. Seemed very
I
disruptive of
mean,
peace.
there's nothing peaceful about Nazis. So, yeah, 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 it's gonna be a fun call, fun record. It's just gonna go really well. I can just tell. What a time.
Yeah. So that's what we're gonna start off with. Where does that kind of sit with you? Land with you?
Um, I will go out on a limb and just say that I personally do not agree with the interpretation of freedom of speech means that we need to allow hate speech. And then I have lots of great people in my life and colleagues and even patients that may see this different. So I can hold space for that, that there's different interpretations. But there are lots of countries that do this differently. And I would argue in a very like effective way, because genuinely, like, tolerance should not include hate. And it's like, I mean, there's some great analogies or pictures out there of like, if you're tolerating hate and protecting hate is allowed, it will destroy like those that are protecting. So I think it's a very complicated thing. So I don't want to get too off on a tangent, Tiffany, but those are my initial thoughts so far.
I mean, it is. There are for sure different ways, more effective, efficient ways to interpret the ability to talk about and discuss things that we wish, for sure. Um,
So Tiffany, I mean, how do you feel like physically? I know we talked a lot about this in some of our calls, but like, how do you feel physically as we start this conversation or start to dive in?
I kind of want to throw up. I'm not
Yeah.
like it's one of those things that like I don't think ever in my lifetime uh that I would be sitting in a space where like Nazis were like an ongoing current conversation. Um like that to me is just kind of crazy to think about. Like
It's
just
just
having
always
to like
something.
just having to like use the terms and think about like, oh yeah, like Nazis are they're a thing that we now experience and encounter in life. It's kind of like I read this in a history book. I had never expected this to be like front page on the internet or something of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, we in Cincinnati went viral, I think, for all the wrong reasons.
Ooh.
And it's on national news. Just even the fact that like there was an officer that stopped them like before they protested by the school. And so a lot of the dialogue on some ends have been, well, they have the right to protest and da, da, da. It's like, so I would almost argue like, should that be allowed? And like, we're a trauma podcast, so we're not a politics podcast, but I will just say like that was so traumatic for so many people that one, those individuals felt so comfortable to show their hate so openly, unmasked, just out there,
Yeah.
just happy to, put that out there, their hate to the world, and that they were protected to be able to do that. So, I find it really, 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 really sad, and just almost just like we'll have to find a new word than disgusting, but that's just the word repugnant, disgusting, spit in mouth. Like it's just not.
Soap in mouth.
It's just not great, is it?
It's definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah, I find it hard not to agree in that, like, yes, I understand we live in quote unquote a free country where we should be able to protest, our values and beliefs. But I do also think it's very valid and fair that some things are it doesn't make logical sense to be protesting that like I want to be a Nazi. Like that just seems like such a far footnote of an excuse. to use our constitution for.
Yeah, and something I would just throw out is like if we're concerned about well, who defines what hate is, it's like in Germany, for example, like it's just basically like you cannot bring anything related to Nazis. Like it's there are ways to define this where it is literally like
Is it, does that not like? I know I'm gonna get a little heated today. I'm gonna try not to. But does it not like grate on your brain when a country
God.
that we helped decided to like ban anything Nazi related, and we're over here like, yeah, we're not banning this stuff. Like it blows my mind. I'm like, we were like we were firsthand a part of like stopping that. Are we not on the same like board line as Germany? That would seem appropriate in my opinion.
It's just always something, isn't it? You know?
It is. It's just I don't know. It's really bizarre that like we don't have the same stances as some other countries that like while they personally as a country went through it firsthand, like it's not like we weren't there. It's not like we were watching it from an uninvolved perspective.
It's just something that it's handled differently across the world. So I mean, just like there's no allowance of like any images related to being like no, there literally is like Article 5 of the Basic Life German Constitution, the freedom of expression has limits to protect young people, privacy, or personal honor. It's illegal to deny the Holocaust. So it it's just something where I like genuinely I just think of this specific example. Like there are other countries that have freedom of speech, and we also already have limits on freedom of speech. You cannot go and shout bomb in an airport. You can't scream fire in a movie theater. You can't threaten someone. There are some people who don't understand that if you verbally threaten, like, "Oh, I'm gonna hit you. I'm gonna hit you in the face, or I'm gonna hurt you," like that is assault. You don't have to physically like. So if you threaten something or imply violence, that is assault, and you could be charged with that. So like there are so many limits from libel to slander. So like we already have limits in place. So I just, we can debate the meaning of the word and situation, but it's just one that like it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am curious, have you ran into people or ever encountered people at any point in your life where it seems like they like just don't recognize or refuse to recognize or just or maybe even unaware that there are such limitations on our freedom of speech?
I think people realize they're there, but I don't think they recognize them as limits because I don't know how to make sense. Like it's just the way it is. Like you can't do those things. So like it's just a different framework. And so like I am grateful for freedoms and like I get the concern of like, hey, if not if everything is not allowed, like who defines it? I'm like, I guess my kind of comeback is like, who is sitting there being like, we need to defend the rights of actual Nazis to be able to be Nazis? Like, I mean, it's just like, like I just don't think that's the best situation.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. It definitely paints a very particular image and power dynamic when that is being done.
Yeah, I mean, there's also some different bills that have gone out in other countries or laws about limit sharing misinformation. And so that's something that some politicians have discussed and taken out of context and like, American citizens and what they're dealing with. And I just want to say a few things. Like one, I have not seen any case of any American soldiers stationed on a base where they are getting charged with a violation of the law. But I also just want to maybe point out, like, if you're in another country, those laws take precedent, just like anyone in the United States under the laws of where we are living and residing. So, um, but also, it's like it's not. Like, I just think sometimes things are taken out of context. So there are some laws, an example, in Australia and the United Kingdom about limiting the spread of misinformation. And within the law, I'm not a legal expert, so this is not a legal podcast. But the intent of this law is that you cannot intentionally share misinformation. So if I share that Tiffany uh, is no longer a therapist, it doesn't have a license. Like if I share an article that says that this is not true, by the way, but if I share an article that says that and I know it's not true, I am held responsible for that, that I am intentionally spreading misinformation.
You know, that would be a fascinatingly effective law to have here.
It would be interesting. I think, again, people get a little spicy with some of the different interpretations. So, um, I just think we have to be really careful of like the past of allowing hate speech
Hmm.
and having to be there for free speech. Like there are lots of countries that have limits on other things than what we do in the United States, and it goes okay. It's just very interesting that there's shades of gray, and so I think some people are thinking of like full on censorship where you can't share anything, and I can acknowledge that taking one step forward of being like, hey, this group's not allowed or this is a step in that direction, but it's also like we're talking about allowing people who are openly advocating for one race's supremacy over the other and being able to use violence or any other means to meet that. And like that's terrorism. So like that's literally acts of terrorism. That is like not the same thing as like, oh, I feel differently about this political issue and want to have the right to debate it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that we are unfortunately crossing the lines a little too much into like what is freedom of speech, what is and what is like becoming terroristic acts of like how we are choosing to support specific freedom of speech groups. I'm gonna air quotes here.
Yeah. I just think it's something to be concerned about, worried about. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine. Like I know the area itself has some pretty touchy history. Um but I also wonder like I can only imagine what the people living in that area um is experiencing and feeling with that happening so close to their home.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of anger. I mean, there's still a lot of anger, and I don't think it's going to go away.
Yeah, there is a lot. Speaking of hate, I know that was one instance of hate. Um, Before I like jump into another instance, do you have any more comments on that instance of hate or any particular hate moment that you want to talk about or dive into first?
No, no, I think this is what I prepped for because honestly, I had less fun prepping for this one than maybe other episodes. So I just wanted to at least say I did a little diligence to check myself of how do other countries approach freedom of expression and so, pardon me, some of the limits are already there.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna throw another potential controversial incident at you. You may or may not have heard this one. There was, I think it was sometime in January, just across the river, not far, Newport, not really big deal. There was a distribution of KKK flyers promoting
Yeah.
anti-immigrant sentiments. They were attributed to the Trinity White Knights of the KKK, and they featured images of Uncle Sam kicking a family alongside the message of "Lead now, avoid deportation."
Disgusting.
Yeah, they also listed on the flyers a national office location in Maysville, Kentucky, claiming active chapters. Um, not only there, but also in Ohio and Indiana, Tennessee as well.
Yeah, I am really sad to say that, like, that is happening more often than I think is reported, in the news because it's happening as often that there are people I mean, some of this is to make people angry and rage bait, but it is also hate, like, just open hatred, and it's very sad that hatred is allowed so much,
Yeah.
uh, space to exist, I would say.
Yeah, hatred is unfortunately very I feel like it's always been prominent, but I feel like now it's like front page prominent.
I mean, it's just seems like it's just about everywhere right now.
It does. Let's see.
Yeah, I think that we have a position of privilege getting to talk about this because it hasn't maybe as directly impacted us. I mean, I know it's directly impacted people we care about and work alongside and take care of, but um, I truly can't imagine how that would feel if someone came to my neighborhood and was advocating for my demise and deportation and fail and death and destruction. I mean, that's just a whole nother level of things. So I think it's important to name what it is because I think when we change words, it makes things sound less whatever. Like that's what like that's what we're talking about is like the freedom of someone to share those ideals and those. I don't even know if you can call it ideals. Those are the things they're advocating for is
Mhm.
murder, hatred, destruction, deportation, and uh yeah, all things that you would not want anyone to wish upon you is what these groups are advocating for.
Yeah. I I know House Bill 157, which I have not followed up on, so like if there's updates, strike me down now for not knowing them. Um actually proposed an establishment of a Bureau of Hate Crimes to hope to enhance investigation and prevent future hate crimes. Again, haven't had the time to like sit down and see where that's gotten, but
I
I
am
know.
not familiar, so I definitely don't want to try to speak on it without knowing as much.
And then another very, very like present hate that is going around is the LGBT hate. I know even in just last year, um, there was more than 60 reported incidents, protests, propaganda, and harassments against the LGBT community. Um, which brings me into like the other talking point of the current like LGBT, DEI, like I hate to lump them together, but unfortunately, like that's just the way like they're being lumped together lately, and how that is impacting certain businesses and facilities around the areas of Cincinnati and in Cincinnati.
Well, I want to be careful about lumping everything the same. I do see it like how it's connected. I think the challenge is like if I'm talking to someone that sees any of this differently, they may agree with me on parts of it, but if I throw it all in like that, I think is kind of some of the challenge the discourse. It's like everything. So almost like, okay, I need you to agree on this. But I hear what you're coming from too, that it is also
Yeah.
like
Well,
connected because
yeah. It,
yeah.
it like my personal opinion, it's connected but very separate. But what I found in research is like the current political administration is like it's all one thing. Is what I mean in terms of like how they're lumping it together. I by no means want to paint the picture that I think they're like one giant lump thing because they are very like they are thinly they are connected, but they are also like very completely diverse topics that warrant very different discussions.
Yeah, I guess that's my active protest then that I am not going to talk about all these things as one thing together because then I am just allowing them to shape the narrative of discussion that it is about everything and us versus them. And I don't believe that that everyone that thinks differently than I do is my enemy or against
Mhm.
me or there's a war. I think if we can dehumanize someone, then we are able to then talk about them as less than and go, and that is certainly what is politically happening right now. That there are a lot of out groups being attacked and rapid succession and different things, and it's like that we've come a long way from John McCain saying that Barack Obama is a good man and that they see each other differently. They see some political issues differently, but that he is a good man, and that's not what they were debating. Is the person. I think it's very fair to say you're a long way from that kind of discourse on politics. Not that it was all beautiful and pretty, but
Mhm.
um, it's sad. It's sad. I think we look very silly. And I think, I mean, I know just there's so many people that are like not even wanting to check the news or have to control when they check it for fear of the triggers it brings and the inability to regulate and manage.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't know about you and the populations you work with, but I know a good chunk of my population tends to be younger adults. And I know a lot of them are kind of really frustrated with the hate that is happening at a lot of local universities. Um, I don't know if we made front page. Hopefully, we didn't make front page for this, but where one of our universities posted biological men and women restroom signs, as opposed to just like standard male female restroom signs. Um, that was a very extreme kind of approach.
Yeah, there's a lot of things um, shifting back and forth, a lot of things up in the air, um, a lot to keep up on.
Yeah, there is a lot to keep up on, a lot of turning things. I don't know if we could ever really fully be informed of everything that's happening. Mhm.
I don't think we can either. Anything else, Tiffany, about hate or just hate, the discussion around hate or trauma? Anything else related to that?
I think it's important to talk about talking about hate is difficult, but I do also wanted to dive a little bit into like how hate can re-traumatize people, how it can re-trigger people, kind of like that little nugget, so that we're not too focused on like just the hate events that are happening.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Where would someone start with that, Tiffany?
Yeah, so something that I kind of wanted to uh touch on was just like talking about like making sure you have healthy support groups, setting boundary limitations so that you're not putting yourself intentionally in situations around people, if you're aware of like their political stance on something, really taking more of a time to dedicate to protecting your peace in this time, especially if hate or past hate, intergenerational hate is something that has impacted you or your support system or your family or your friends. um like, I hate to be that cliche therapist, but like self-care, self-care, self-care is going to be overly important in helping managing our stress and anxiety levels, our triggers, all of that during these upcoming years.
Yeah, I mean, hate has an impact. It's one that I think shows up in a lot of different ways, whether it's a microaggression or flat out aggression. But I think it's on each of us to support the people in our lives that are impacted by this and not having them have to educate us about something, making them the expert. Like we need to put that time in to support uh, people that we care about.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. That being said, do you have any recommendations or kind of therapeutic thoughts that you would offer general public um, in order to help them navigate this really stressful, tense period of life?
Um, Listen to your inner gut and wisdom, and we have power when we act together. And so, using your voice on what you're sharing, using your voice with what you're expressing, um, not just feeling like it's a helpless, doomed situation. Um, but I also got to check myself with the amount of privilege that I have to get to sit here and say this, because some people may just be trying to get through and get by. And so I would say to those people, it's okay that you're just trying to get by. And you, while it's great if we all can chip into the cause, uh, it's okay if you don't have that right now, and it's okay if maybe you need to receive that support. There's a give and take in any community, mutual aid, and so you don't have to always be a giving member at every moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something else I just want to touch on before we um, kind of wrap up for the day is that hate and trauma does impact your brain and how you respond to fear and threat detections. It can sometimes overactivate the body, keep it in that flight or fight state, which can really lead to dysregulation, sometimes long-term health issues. Um, it can also impact decision making, emotional regulation, a person's impulse control. Um, Sometimes, if you're stuck in that state too long, you can see heightened aggression, emotional numbness, difficulty forming relationships. And that's just a few things. So, like, if you are like, super stressed out, super numb, you're just absolutely needing extra support, please, 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 please don't hesitate to reach out. There are support groups, there are safe support groups out there. There are plenty of safe therapists that would be happy to sit with you in a safe space and give you time to just sit with the chaos of what is happening.
Yeah. I think if you're needing the extra support, I think that's a very good point that you're sharing, Tiffany. Just that therapy is there and other outlets are there when things like this are going on.
Oh, right. Any last questions, thoughts, comments from you?
No, I don't think so today.
Mhm. All right, well, I want to leave you guys with kind of a quote, not really a quote. Um, but hate is a weed that thrives in ignorance and division, but knowledge and community are the sunlight and soil that can eradicate it. We all have a role in dismantling extremist ideologies and fostering spaces of inclusion and compassion. For those impacted by hate, healing is possible through community support, professional care, and collective resilience. Thank you for joining us today. If you feel like reaching out, please touch with base with us on Patreon, our website, email us. We're happy to converse with anyone and everyone that we can.
Look forward to engaging with you all.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Deciphering Growth. We hope you found our conversation helpful and insightful. Subscribe to our podcast for more episodes and check out our Patreon for more content. Don't hesitate to contact us on social media if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.